My husband's mistress shaved my hair and locked the door at Thanksgiving. No one wants you at the party. Your family is mine now. I stood in the rain, exposed and ashamed. A man was drenched, trying to protect a puppy. I gave him my umbrella, letting the rain hit my bald head. Minutes later, a convoy of limousines pulled up. The man stood up and said a sentence. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. I never imagined that 35 years of marriage could end with me standing bald in the rain, watching my husband's mistress throw my belongings onto the wet pavement like garbage. The evening had started normally enough. Well, as normal as things could be when you're sharing Thanksgiving dinner with the woman who's been sleeping with your husband for the past 2 years. Eunice sat at my dining table in my chair, carving the turkey I had spent all morning preparing, acting as if she belonged there more than I did. "Harriet, could you bring more wine from the kitchen?" Dominic asked without looking at me. His tone was the same one he used with service workers, polite but distant. When had I become a stranger in my own home? I rose from the folding chair they had placed at the far end of the table, the one usually reserved for children. The humiliation burned in my chest, but I swallowed it down. At 61, I had learned to swallow a lot of things. The kitchen felt like a refuge until Eunice followed me in, her high heels clicking against the tile floor I had mopped that morning. She was 34, blonde. Everything I used to be before time and disappointment wore me down. "You know, Harriet," she said, examining her perfect manicure, "Dominic and I have been talking. This arrangement isn't working anymore." I gripped the wine bottle tighter. "What arrangement?" She laughed, a sound like crystal breaking. "Oh, sweet Harriet. Always pretending not to see what's right in front of you." She moved closer, and I could smell her expensive perfume. "The arrangement where you live in our house, eat our food, and pretend you still matter." "This is my house," I whispered. "I've lived here for 28 years. "Not anymore." Eunice's voice dropped to something cruel and satisfied. "Dominic's been very generous letting you stay this long, but I'm pregnant now, and we need space for our real family." The wine bottle slipped from my hands, shattering against the floor. Red wine spread across the white tiles like blood. "Clean that up," Eunice said, stepping over the mess. "Then pack your things. You have an hour." I stood there, staring at the broken glass, feeling something inside me shatter just as completely. Through the kitchen window, I could see Dominic's relatives gathering around the table, laughing at something his brother was saying. None of them had spoken to me all evening. I realized now it wasn't an oversight. When I returned to the dining room, the conversation stopped. 12 pairs of eyes looked at me with varying degrees of pity and discomfort. Dominic's sister Margaret actually smirked. "Aunt Harriet," said Dominic's nephew Kevin, not unkindly. "Dad says you're moving out. That's probably for the best, don't you think?" Dominic finally looked at me then, and what I saw in his eyes was worse than hatred. It was indifference. Complete, absolute indifference. "Go pack," he said quietly. "Eunice is tired." I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, to his bedroom now, and began throwing clothes into garbage bags. 35 years reduced to trash bags. My wedding dress hung in the back of the closet, yellowed with age. I left it there. Let Eunice find it someday and wonder if Dominic would discard her just as easily. I was almost finished when Eunice appeared in the doorway with a pair of kitchen shears. "There's one more thing," she said, and her smile was sharp as a blade. "Sit down." "What?" "Sit down." Her voice carried a authority that made me obey before I could think. "You're going to sit there while I fix something that's been bothering me." She moved behind me, and I felt her fingers in my hair. I started to stand, but she pushed me back down. "Stay still. This won't take long." The first cut made a grinding sound. A chunk of my gray hair fell onto my lap. Then another. And another. "Eunice, stop!" I gasped, but she kept cutting, her movements quick and vicious. "This is what happens to women who don't know when their time is up." she hissed in my ear. You should have left gracefully. Now everyone downstairs will see exactly what you really are. She cut until my scalp showed in patches, until I looked like a cancer patient or a crazy woman. When she finished, she gathered the hair from the floor and stuffed it into one of my garbage bags. There, she said, breathless from exertion. Now you look on the outside like what you've always been on the inside. Nothing. I caught sight of myself in the dresser mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. Bald patches, uneven tufts, scalp showing pink and vulnerable. I looked like a victim. I looked exactly like what she wanted me to look like. Go downstairs and say goodbye to everyone, Eunice said. Let them see Dominic's first wife, the practice round. The walk down those stairs was the longest of my life. Each step felt like walking to my own execution. In the dining room, conversation stopped completely. Someone gasped. Margaret actually covered her mouth with her hand. Dominic's face went pale. Jesus Christ, Eunice, what did you do? I gave her a makeover, Eunice said innocently. Don't you think it suits her? I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. I grabbed my garbage bags and headed for the door, hearing whispers behind me like hissing snakes. Outside, it was raining. Hard, cold November rain that soaked through my thin sweater in seconds. I threw my bags into the back seat of my old Honda and sat behind the wheel, shaking. Not from cold, but from the complete destruction of everything I had been for 35 years. I drove aimlessly through the dark streets, rain drumming against the roof. I had nowhere to go. Our few friends had chosen sides long ago, and they hadn't chosen mine. My sister lived 3 states away, and we barely spoke. I had no money of my own. Dominic controlled all our accounts. I pulled over when I couldn't see through my tears anymore, parking under a streetlight on some random residential street. That's when I saw him. A man crouched in the rain about 50 feet away, trying to shield something with his body. As I watched, a small golden puppy darted out from under his jacket, immediately getting soaked. The man gathered the puppy back into his coat, but I could see him shivering. Without thinking, I grabbed my umbrella and got out of the car. The rain hit my exposed scalp like tiny needles, but I walked toward them anyway. Here, I said, holding the umbrella over the man and the puppy. Take this. He looked up at me, and I saw eyes that were kind but tired. He was maybe 50, with salt and pepper hair plastered to his skull. His clothes were expensive but ruined by the rain. I can't take your umbrella, he said. You'll get soaked. I'm already soaked, I said, and it was true. Rain ran down my face, over my ruined hair, soaking through every layer I wore. Besides, he needs it more than I do. I nodded toward the puppy who was shivering in his arms. The man studied my face, and I saw something change in his expression. Not pity, exactly, but recognition. Like he understood what it meant to be caught in a storm with nowhere to shelter. What's your name? He asked. Harriet, I said. Harriet Morrison. I almost said Harriet Chambers, but that wasn't my name anymore, was it? Jared, he said. Jared Blackwell. That's when the first limousine appeared at the end of the street, then another, and another. 3 black cars with tinted windows, moving slowly through the rain like sharks. Jared sighed and stood up, still holding the puppy. I was hoping to avoid this a little longer. The limousine stopped in a perfect line. Men in dark suits got out, umbrella already open, moving toward us with practiced efficiency. Mr. Blackwell, one of them said. We've been looking for you, sir. Jared looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made my breath catch. Harriet Morrison, he said quietly. How would you like to learn something interesting about your father's business partners? I stared at him, rain running down my face, feeling like Alice tumbling down the rabbit hole. My father's been dead for 6 years. I know, Jared said, but his business arrangements are very much alive. And I think your husband has been keeping some very important secrets from you. The inside of Jared's limousine felt like stepping into another world. Soft leather seats, climate control that immediately warmed my chilled skin, and a silence so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. The puppy had fallen asleep in my lap, a small golden weight that somehow anchored me to reality. Jared sat across from me, no longer the rain-soaked stranger I'd helped on the street. His damp hair was combed back, and someone had given him a fresh suit jacket. The transformation was startling. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My hand unconsciously went to my ruined hair, trying to cover the worst of Eunice's handiwork. "Somewhere we can talk privately," Jared said, "and somewhere you can clean up if you'd like." He pressed a button, and a partition lowered. "Marcus, the Fairmont, please. The penthouse." The Fairmont. I knew that hotel. It was the most expensive place in the city. Dominic and I had eaten there once for our 10th anniversary, and he'd complained about the cost for weeks afterward. "I don't understand what's happening," I said. "Who are you really?" Jared leaned forward, his expression serious. "My name is Jared Blackwell. I own Blackwell Industries." He paused, watching my face. "We manufacture medical equipment. We also have significant real estate holdings and investment portfolios." The name meant nothing to me, but the way he said it suggested it should. "And what does that have to do with my father?" "Your father, William Morrison, was one of my business partners from 1985 until his death. We had several joint ventures, including some property investments that should have passed to you upon his death." I stared at him. "That's impossible. My father was an accountant. He worked for the county. He didn't have business partners or property investments." "That's what he told you," Jared said gently. "But William was much more than a county accountant. He was also a very shrewd investor. We started small, buying distressed properties, fixing them up, selling them for profit. Over the years, our partnership grew considerably." The limousine stopped in front of the Fairmont. Through the tinted windows, I could see uniformed doormen waiting. This was really happening. "Why didn't he tell me?" I asked. Why didn't I know about any of this? Jared's expression darkened. "Because someone has been intercepting the communications about your inheritance for the past 6 years. Someone has been making sure you never learned the truth about what your father left you." 20 minutes later, I sat in a marble bathroom the size of my kitchen, staring at my reflection while a hairdresser named Antoine worked to salvage what Eunice had destroyed. The penthouse suite was larger than most houses, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. "We can work with this," Antoine murmured, his French accent thick with concentration. "A very short pixie cut, very chic. You will look magnificent, madame." I closed my eyes and let him work, trying to process everything Jared had told me. My father, a secret businessman, inheritance I'd never known about, someone intercepting communications. It felt like a dream, or maybe a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. When Antoine finished, I barely recognized myself. The brutal hack job was gone, replaced by a sleek, sophisticated cut that somehow made me look younger, stronger. "Beautiful," Antoine declared. "You look like a woman who owns the world." If only that were true. I found Jared in the suite's living room, standing by the windows with his phone pressed to his ear. The puppy was curled up on an expensive-looking sofa, fast asleep. "Yes, I want everything from 1985 forward," he was saying. "Every document, every correspondence, every bank record." He noticed me and gestured for me to sit. "And Marcus, be discreet. We don't want to alert anyone that we're investigating." He hung up and turned to face me. "You look better." "I feel like I'm losing my mind," I said honestly. "This morning I was making turkey for my husband's family. Tonight I'm sitting in a penthouse learning that my father was some kind of secret businessman. None of this makes sense." Jared sat across from me, his expression sympathetic. "I know it's a lot to absorb. Let me start with what I can prove right now." He opened a leather portfolio and spread several documents across the coffee table. "These are property deeds, all jointly owned by your father and my company. I looked at the papers, recognizing my father's signature on several of them. Addresses I'd never heard of, property values that made my head spin. This one, Jared pointed to a deed dated 2016, is a commercial building downtown. Current value, approximately $400,000. This one is a duplex in the suburbs, worth about $250,000. And this, he pointed to another document, is a small office complex. $750,000, conservatively. I felt dizzy. These were my father's. Half his, half mine. According to our partnership agreement, his share should have transferred to you upon his death. You should own half interest in properties worth approximately $1.4 million. But I never received anything, I said weakly. No one ever contacted me about any inheritance except the $25,000 from his life insurance. That's because someone has been intercepting all legal communications intended for you. Jared's voice was quiet, but I heard the anger underneath. Someone with access to your mail, your personal information, someone close enough to forge your signature if necessary. The implication hit me like a physical blow. Dominic. When did you give him power of attorney over your affairs? I thought back, my memory hazy. About 8 years ago when I had that surgery, gallbladder removal. He said it would make things easier if he could handle the paperwork while I recovered. And you never revoked it? I realized I didn't know. I never thought about it. We were married, I trusted him. I thought he was taking care of things. Jared nodded grimly. He was taking care of things, just not for you. He pulled out another document. This is from the county records office, filed 3 months ago. I looked at the paper, and my blood turned to ice. It was a sales contract. For the duplex Jared had just shown me, the one worth $250,000, sold for $200,000 cash. And there, at the bottom of the page, was my signature. A signature I had never written. He forged this, I whispered. That's what I believe. And if he forged this one. Jared spread out more documents. There are 3 other properties that have been sold in the past 2 years, all with your forged signature. All for amounts slightly below market value, probably to ensure quick sales. I stared at the papers, adding up the numbers in my head. $700,000. Dominic had stolen $700,000 from me by selling property I didn't even know I owned. Where's the money? I asked. Jared's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen and his expression darkened further. Marcus just sent me something interesting. He showed me his phone. Bank records for joint accounts in yours and Dominic's names. The screen showed a series of deposits over the past 2 years, each coinciding with the property sales. Large amounts going in, and then being transferred out to an account I'd never heard of. Sterling Wedding Services, I read aloud. What is that? According to their website, they're a high-end wedding planning company, specializing in luxury ceremonies. Jared looked up at me. It appears your husband is planning quite an expensive celebration with your money. I thought about Eunice's smug smile, her announcement about being pregnant, the way the entire family had looked at me like I was already gone. How expensive? Jared showed me an invoice that made my stomach lurch. $80,000 for a wedding scheduled for January 15th, less than 2 months from now. $80,000. More money than I'd ever seen at one time. Money that was supposed to be mine, funding a wedding between my husband and his pregnant mistress. There's more, Jared said quietly. The venue they've chosen for the ceremony. Do you want to know where it is? I nodded, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. Morrison Estate Gardens, he said. It's a historic property that hosts weddings and events. Very exclusive, very expensive. The name hit me like a punch to the chest. Morrison Estate? Your great-grandfather's property. Your father sold it to my company in 1992. but we kept the name in honor of the family history. It's been one of our most successful investments. We've transformed it into a premier wedding venue. I stared at him, pieces clicking together in my mind like a horrible puzzle. So Dominic is using my stolen money to marry his mistress at a property that belonged to my family. That appears to be the case, yes. I stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. The city spread out below me, twinkling lights in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Dominic was probably in bed with Eunice, planning their future with my money, in my family's former home. What kind of man does that? I asked the glass, my breath fogging the window. What kind of man steals from his wife to pay for his wedding to another woman? The kind of man, Jared said quietly behind me, who doesn't expect his wife to ever find out the truth. I turned back to face him. But I have found out. So what happens now? Jared's smile was sharp as a blade. Now, Harriet Morrison, we take back everything that was stolen from you. And we make sure your husband gets exactly what he deserves. Outside the penthouse windows, it had stopped raining. But I had a feeling the storm was just beginning. I barely slept that night, despite the luxury of the penthouse suite's king-sized bed. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dominic's face when he told me to pack. The indifference, the complete absence of any feeling at all. At 7 a.m, Jared knocked softly on the bedroom door. Harriet? There's someone here I think you should meet. I found him in the suite's dining room with an elderly man in an expensive gray suit. The man stood when he saw me, his eyes kind but sharp with intelligence. Mrs. Morrison, he said, extending his hand. I'm Harold Pemberton. I was your father's attorney for over 30 years. I shook his hand, confused. I've never heard of you. When my father died, everything went through Davidson and Associates downtown. Harold's expression darkened. That's because someone made sure you never received my communications. I've been trying to reach you for 6 years, Mrs. Morrison. Ever since your father's death. He opened a briefcase and pulled out a thick file. Your father came to see me 6 months before he passed away. He was concerned about your marriage, specifically about your husband's attitude toward money and control. I sat down heavily. What do you mean? Your father noticed things, Harold said gently. The way your husband handled your finances. The way he discouraged you from maintaining friendships, from pursuing interests of your own. William was worried about what would happen to you if he wasn't there to watch over things. Jared poured coffee from a silver service, his movements careful and precise. Harold, why don't you tell Harriet about the trust? Trust? I looked between them. What trust? Harold opened the file and pulled out several legal documents. Your father established a trust 6 months before his death. A trust that owns his share of all business ventures with Mr. Blackwell here, plus several additional investments you're unaware of. I stared at the documents, my father's familiar signature at the bottom of each page. I don't understand. The trust was designed to activate only under specific circumstances, Harold continued. Specifically, if you were ever divorced, widowed, or if we could prove that your husband was stealing from you or abusing his power of attorney. And now we can prove it, Jared said grimly. Harold nodded. The forged signatures, Mr. Blackwell's investigators discovered yesterday are more than enough evidence, which means, Mrs. Morrison, that as of this moment, you are the sole beneficiary of the Morrison Family Trust. He handed me a document with official seals and signatures. At the top, in bold letters, I read, Morrison Family Trust, Current Value Assessment. The number at the bottom made my hands shake. $2,800,000. This can't be right, I whispered. It's conservative, Jared said. We had the properties appraised last month. The commercial real estate alone is worth more than $2 million. Add the investment portfolio your father built over 20 years, plus the cash reserves, and you're looking at close to $3 million. I set the document down with trembling hands. My father was worth $3 million. Your father was very good at what he did, Harold said. He started with a small inheritance from his own father and turned it into substantial wealth through careful investments and his partnership with Mr. Blackwell. But he lived so modestly, I said. He drove an old car, lived in that little house. Because he was saving everything for you, Jared said quietly. Everything he built was meant to ensure you'd never have to depend on anyone else for security. Harold pulled out another document. There's more, Mrs. Morrison. The trust doesn't just contain money and real estate. It also holds a 49% stake in Blackwell Industries itself. I looked at Jared in shock. You mean? You're my business partner, he said with a slight smile. You have been for 6 years. You just didn't know it. And as my partner, you're entitled to a seat on the board of directors and a share of all profits. How much profit? I asked weakly. Last year alone, your share would have been approximately $420,000. I had to grip the edge of the table to keep from falling over. $420,000 in 1 year. While I was clipping coupons and wearing the same winter coat for 8 years, I was entitled to nearly $500,000 annually. Where has that money been going? I asked. Into a separate account, Harold said. Drawing interest, waiting for you. All of it, every penny from the past 6 years. I did quick math in my head and felt sick. That's over $2 million just in profit sharing. $2.3 million, to be exact, Jared confirmed, plus interest. I stood up abruptly and walked to the window, looking down at the city below. Somewhere down there, Dominic was probably having breakfast with Eunice, planning their wedding with my stolen money, thinking I was broken and defeated. He never knew, I said suddenly. Dominic never knew about any of this. No, Harold confirmed. Your father specifically instructed that the trust remain secret until it was activated. He was afraid that if your husband learned about it, he might try to manipulate you into signing it over to him. Smart man, Jared said. Seems like he knew his son-in-law better than his daughter did. I turned back to them. So legally, all of this is mine, right now. As of yesterday when we confirmed the fraudulent signatures, Harold said. I filed the activation papers this morning. You are now officially one of the wealthiest women in the state. The reality of it was overwhelming. Yesterday morning, I was an abandoned wife with no money and nowhere to go. Today, I was worth over $5 million. There's something else, Jared said carefully. Something I think you should know about the Morrison estate gardens. I sat back down, sensing another revelation coming. When your father sold the property to us in '92, it wasn't a simple sale, Jared explained. It was more of a long-term lease arrangement. He retained certain rights to the property, rights that transferred to the trust upon his death. What kind of rights? The right to reclaim the property under specific circumstances, Harold said, including if it could be proven that the sale proceeds were being misused by his heirs. I frowned. But I never received any sale proceeds. Exactly, Jared said, which means, legally, the sale contract has been breached. The property reverts to the Morrison Family Trust. You mean, the venue where your husband is planning to marry his mistress? Jared's smile was sharp. You own it. The implications hit me like a tidal wave. Not only did Dominic steal my money to pay for his wedding, but he was planning to hold it at a property that legally belonged to me. Can we stop the wedding? I asked. Better than that, Harold said. We can let it proceed exactly as planned. I looked at him in confusion. Think about it, Jared explained. Your husband has invited everyone he knows to witness his marriage to Eunice. His family, her family, their friends, business associates, everyone who was there last night when she humiliated you. So imagine their surprise, Harold said with a gleeful expression, when the owner of the property shows up during the ceremony to reclaim her venue. With evidence of how the wedding was funded, Jared added, and a few other surprises we've uncovered. What other surprises? Jared and Harold exchanged a look. Tell me, Harriet, Jared said carefully. How much do you really know about Eunice? Nothing, really. She's 34. She worked at some marketing firm downtown. That's all Dominic ever told me. She did work at a marketing firm, Harold said, until she was fired 18 months ago for embezzling client funds. I stared at him. What? She's been unemployed since then, Jared continued, living off credit cards and the generosity of older men. Dominic isn't her first married target, Harriet. She's done this before. Harold pulled out a newspaper clipping from 2 years ago. The headline read, "Local businessman loses home in messy divorce." Below it was a photo of a man about Dominic's age looking haggard and defeated. Richard Kellerman, Harold said. Eunice was his girlfriend for 8 months. By the time she was done with him, he'd lost his house, his business, and his children wouldn't speak to him. She's a professional, Jared said bluntly. She targets married men with assets, gets them to leave their wives, then bleeds them dry. The pregnancy is probably fake, too. I felt a strange mixture of vindication and disgust. How do you know all this? Because when someone tries to con my business partner, Jared said, I take it personally. I've had investigators watching Eunice for the past month. We have evidence of everything, Harold added. Her employment history, her previous marks, even medical records showing she can't actually get pregnant due to a procedure she had 5 years ago. I sank back in my chair, overwhelmed. So, Dominic is being played just as much as I was. The difference, Jared said, is that Dominic chose to betray you. Eunice is just giving him what he deserves. What happens now? I asked. Harold began gathering his documents. Now we let them proceed with their plans. Let them spend your stolen money on their fake wedding at your property. Let them invite everyone they know to witness their triumph. And then? Jared's smile was cold as winter. Then we show up and take back everything that belongs to you, in front of everyone who ever doubted you, everyone who turned their backs on you last night. But first, Harold said, we need to make sure they can't run when the truth comes out, can't hide assets or disappear. How do we do that? By letting them think they've won, Jared said, right up until the moment we destroy them. I looked out the window again, but this time the view looked different. The city below wasn't just a place I was looking at anymore. It was a place I belonged to, a place where I had power. When is the wedding? I asked. January 15th, Harold said. 6 weeks from now. Good, I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. That gives us plenty of time to prepare. As I spoke the words, I realized something had changed in me overnight. The broken woman who had stood in the rain with her hair hacked off was gone. In her place was someone harder, someone who understood exactly what needed to be done. Dominic and Eunice thought they had won. They had no idea the game was just beginning. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of lawyers, investigators, and evidence gathering. I had moved into a furnished apartment downtown, nothing fancy, but clean and anonymous. Jared thought it was better if I stayed out of sight while we built our case. Every morning, I woke up expecting to feel guilty about what we were planning. Instead, I felt more alive than I had in years. The bank records are fascinating, Marcus, Jared's head of security, said as he spread documents across the conference table. We were meeting in Jared's office, a corner suite that overlooked the financial district. Your husband has been very busy since you left. I studied the papers he'd laid out. Bank statements, credit card bills, receipts. A paper trail of Dominic's activities over the past month. He's withdrawn over $30,000 in cash, Marcus continued, most of it from the accounts funded by your stolen property sales. What's he spending it on? I asked. Well, there's the wedding expenses, obviously. But look at this. Marcus pointed to a series of charges from the past 2 weeks. A cruise deposit for $15,000, scheduled for January 20th, 5 days after the wedding. Honeymoon? Jared said grimly. A very expensive honeymoon, I observed. $15,000 for a cruise? It's a month-long Mediterranean cruise, Marcus said. First-class suite, all-inclusive. The kind of trip that costs more than most people make in a year. I felt a familiar burn in my chest. Dominic had never taken me on a honeymoon. We'd been too poor when we married, he said. We'd go someday when we could afford it. That someday never came, but apparently Eunice rated a $15,000 trip to Europe. There's more, Marcus said. He's also been shopping for jewelry, Tiffany, Cartier, places like that. Charged over $20,000 in the past 2 weeks. Wedding jewelry, I said. And this is interesting. Marcus pulled out a lease agreement. He's rented a house in the Hamptons for the summer. $12,000 a month, 6-month lease. I stared at the document, recognizing Dominic's signature. $72,000 for a summer rental? He's really going all out, Jared observed. Spending money like he's suddenly rich. Because he thinks he is, I said quietly. He thinks he successfully stole everything and got away with it. Marcus nodded. And based on his spending patterns, he has no idea that any of this can be traced back to you. He genuinely believes he's free and clear. What about Eunice? I asked. What has she been up to? Marcus's expression darkened. That's where things get really interesting. He pulled out another file, this one marked with Eunice's name. She's been busy too, but in a different way. He spread out a series of photographs. Eunice at lunch with an older man I didn't recognize. Eunice coming out of a medical clinic. Eunice meeting with someone in an expensive car. Who are these people? I asked. The older man is Dr. Richard Saunders, Marcus said. He's a fertility specialist. Apparently, Eunice has been paying him for fake pregnancy documentation. I wasn't surprised, but it still stung. So the pregnancy really is fake? Completely fabricated. We have records showing she's been getting hormone shots to fake the symptoms, plus falsified ultrasound images and blood tests. What about the man in the car? Marcus's smile was grim. That's Thomas Kellerman, son of Richard Kellerman, the man Eunice destroyed 2 years ago. I looked up sharply. The son of her previous victim? He's been tracking her, Jared explained. Apparently his father's suicide attempt after Eunice ruined him made quite an impression. Thomas has been following her movements, documenting her activities. He wants revenge too, I said. More than that, Marcus said. He wants to see her in prison. He's been building a criminal case against her for fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft. He pulled out another document. This is a warrant application. Thomas has enough evidence to have Eunice arrested on multiple felony charges. He's just been waiting for the right moment. What's the right moment? I asked. When she's committed to something public and can't disappear easily, Jared said. Like a wedding. I began to see the full scope of what we were planning. So while Dominic thinks he's marrying his pregnant girlfriend and starting a new life with my money, he's actually marrying a professional con artist who's about to be arrested for multiple felonies, Marcus finished. Using money that legally belongs to you, at a venue you own. And all of this will happen in front of everyone who witnessed your humiliation, Jared added. I felt a deep satisfaction settle in my chest. How do we coordinate everything? Carefully, Marcus said. Thomas has agreed to hold off on Eunice's arrest until the wedding day. The police will be standing by, but they won't move until we give the signal. What signal? I asked. You walking into your own property and announcing that the wedding is canceled, Jared said with a smile. Over the following week, more pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Harold had filed all the necessary legal documents to formally establish my ownership of Morrison Estate Gardens. We had court orders ready to freeze all of Dominic's accounts the moment we served him with papers. Most importantly, we had indisputable evidence of every crime he'd committed. The forgery alone is good for 5 to 10 years in prison, Harold explained during one of our strategy meetings. Add the theft, the fraud, the illegal sale of property he didn't own, and he's looking at serious time. What about the money he's already spent? I asked. Recoverable, Harold said confidently. The cruise can be canceled, the jewelry can be returned, the house rental can be terminated. He'll lose the deposits, but most of the money can be recovered. And the wedding expenses? Consider it a lesson fee, Jared said. The cost of learning not to steal from your business partner. 3 days before the wedding, I drove past the Morrison Estate Gardens for the first time in years. The property looked exactly like I remembered from childhood visits to my great-grandfather's house, only more polished. Jared's company had transformed it into something magical, gardens perfectly manicured, the old mansion restored to its original grandeur. It hurt to see it looking so beautiful, knowing that this was where my family's history lived, and that Dominic had chosen it specifically to twist the knife deeper. But the hurt was different now. It wasn't the helpless pain of a victim. It was the focused anger of someone who was about to set things right. Second thoughts? Jared asked. He'd insisted on coming with me, partly for moral support and partly because he enjoyed seeing his handiwork. No, I said, surprised by how certain I sounded. Just remembering. Good memories? Some. My great-grandfather used to let me pick flowers in those gardens every summer. He said the estate would always belong to our family, no matter what happened. He was right, Jared said quietly. I used to dream about having my own wedding here someday, I continued, when I was young and still believed in fairy tales. Who says you can't still have it? I looked at him, startled by something in his tone, but before I could ask what he meant, my phone rang. It was Marcus. Harriet, you need to know something. Dominic just made a very large cash withdrawal, $50,000. I felt my stomach drop. Why would he need $50,000 in cash 3 days before the wedding? I don't know, Marcus said, but I'm going to find out. That afternoon, we had our answer. Marcus called another emergency meeting, his expression grim. Bad news, he said without preamble. Dominic has figured out something's wrong. What do you mean? I asked. One of his bank accounts was flagged for suspicious activity when he tried to make another large withdrawal. The bank asked questions about the source of the funds, and apparently someone mentioned that the account was linked to property sales that might be under investigation. My blood ran cold. He knows? Not everything, Marcus said quickly. But he knows enough to be nervous. The $50,000? He's hiring a private security firm for the wedding. Security? Jared frowned. What kind of security? The kind that checks guest lists very carefully and keeps out unwanted visitors, Marcus said meaningfully. I sank into a chair. So we can't just show up at the wedding. We can, Marcus said, but it won't be as simple as walking in the front door. What do you recommend? Jared asked. Marcus smiled, and for the first time all day, he looked pleased. I recommend we give them exactly what they're expecting, just not in the way they expect it. Meaning? Meaning we let them think they've kept you out, Marcus said. Right up until the moment you appear where they least expect you. I looked between Marcus and Jared, seeing something in their expressions that told me they had a plan. What are you thinking? The ceremony is scheduled to start at 4 o'clock, Marcus said. Traditional format. Guests arrive, take their seats, bride and groom exchange vows. Right. What if the ceremony proceeded exactly as planned? Marcus continued. Right up until the minister asks if anyone objects to the union. Understanding dawned on me slowly. You want me to wait until then? I want you to wait until the exact moment when Dominic thinks he's won, Jared said. When everyone is watching, when the cameras are rolling, when there's no way for him to escape or cover up what's about to happen. And then? Marcus's smile was sharp as a blade. Then you stand up and explain to everyone present exactly who really owns the property they're standing on and how the wedding was paid for. The plan was perfect. Cruel, public, and absolutely perfect. What about Eunice's arrest? I asked. Police will be positioned outside, Marcus said. The moment she tries to leave after your announcement, they'll take her into custody. And Dominic? We'll have some very awkward explaining to do to his guests, Jared said, assuming he doesn't try to run first. I thought about it for a long moment. In 3 days, I would walk into a room full of people who had witnessed my humiliation and show them exactly who I really was. I would reclaim everything that had been stolen from me, in front of everyone who thought I was weak and broken. There's one thing, I said finally. What? Marcus asked. I don't want to sit in the back and wait for the objection moment, I said. I want to walk down the aisle. Jared raised an eyebrow. During the ceremony? Right when the bride is supposed to make her entrance, I said. I want to walk through those doors at the exact moment everyone expects to see Eunice, and I want to take back what's mine. The room was quiet for a moment. Then Marcus started to laugh. Harriet Morrison, he said, I think you're going to enjoy this more than any of us expected. January 15th dawned crisp and clear, the kind of winter day that makes everything look sharp and clean. I stood in front of the mirror in my hotel room, adjusting the emerald green dress I'd chosen for the occasion. It was elegant, expensive, and nothing like the dowdy clothes I'd worn during my marriage. The woman looking back at me was a stranger. My short hair had grown out into a sophisticated style that framed my face perfectly. I'd lost weight from stress, but it made me look younger, stronger. Most importantly, my eyes held something they hadn't contained in decades: power. You ready for this? Jared asked from the sitting area of our adjoining suite. He was dressed in a charcoal gray suit that probably cost more than Dominic made in a month. I've been ready for this my whole life, I said, surprising myself with how true it felt. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Security team in position. Dominic has 12 guards posted around the property. Police are standing by 1 block away. Thomas Kellerman is in position with arrest warrant. All systems go. I looked at myself one more time in the mirror. 6 weeks ago, I had been a broken woman standing bald in the rain with nowhere to go. Today, I was about to reclaim everything that had ever been taken from me. Let's go, I said. The Morrison estate gardens looked like something from a fairy tale. Thousands of white roses covered every surface, crystal chandeliers hung from the branches of ancient oak trees, and silk draping transformed the outdoor space into an elegant cathedral. It was beautiful, expensive, and paid for entirely with my stolen money. Marcus met us at the service entrance, dressed like one of the catering staff. Showtime, he said quietly. Guests started arriving an hour ago. Everyone's here. Dominic's family, Eunice's friends, business associates, all the people who watched you get humiliated at Thanksgiving. What's the mood like? I asked. Celebratory, Marcus said with a grim smile. Lots of talk about how much better Dominic looks, how happy he seems, how lucky he is to have found true love. Where's Eunice? Getting ready in the bridal suite. She's wearing a dress that cost $8,000, charged to one of the accounts funded by your property sales. I felt that familiar burn in my chest. $8,000 for a wedding dress. I'd been married in a $50 dress from a discount store because that was all we could afford. Or rather, all Dominic claimed we could afford while he was hiding millions from me. What about Dominic? Jared asked. Nervous, Marcus said. He keeps checking his phone and looking around like he's expecting trouble. But he's going through with it. Ceremony starts in 20 minutes. We made our way through the service corridors of the estate, past bustling caterers and nervous wedding planners. I could hear music drifting from the ceremony space, classical pieces played by a string quartet. Another expensive touch paid for with my money. Remember, Marcus said as we reached our position near the bridal preparation area, you wait for my signal. The minister will call for the bride, the music will start, and that's when you make your entrance. What about the security? I asked. They're all watching the guest entrances in the perimeter. No one expects trouble to come from inside the building. I nodded, checking my purse one more time. Inside were copies of all the legal documents we'd gathered. Proof of ownership, evidence of fraud, bank records showing every stolen dollar. Everything I needed to destroy Dominic's new life in front of everyone who mattered to him. The music changed, signaling the start of the ceremony. Through the walls, I could hear the minister's voice beginning the traditional words. I thought about all the times I'd imagined what Dominic might say if he ever remarried after I died. I never imagined I'd be alive to hear it. Dearly beloved, the minister's voice carried clearly through the estate. We are gathered here today to celebrate the union of Dominic Chambers and Eunice Sterling. Eunice Sterling. Even her name was fake. If anyone has any reason why these two should not be wed, speak now or forever hold your peace. The words hung in the air like a challenge. I wondered what would happen if I took him up on it right now, if I simply stood up and announced the truth. But no, this needed to be done right. Completely publicly, with no room for excuses or explanations. Dominic, the minister continued, do you take Eunice to be your lawfully wedded wife, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer? For richer or poorer? The irony was bitter. Dominic thought he was getting richer by marrying Eunice. He had no idea he was about to lose everything. I do. Dominic's voice carried across the garden, strong and confident. Eunice, do you take Dominic? I tuned out her vows, focusing instead on what was coming next. In a few minutes, the minister would call for the bride and groom to exchange rings. Then he would present them to the assembled guests as husband and wife. Except that wasn't going to happen. Marcus appeared beside me, his face tense with excitement. Almost time, he whispered. You ready? I nodded, smoothing down my dress one final time. More than ready. The minister is about to call for the ring exchange, Marcus said. That's your cue. Walk straight down the center aisle, don't look left or right, and when you get to the altar, just start talking. What if security tries to stop me? They won't have time, Marcus said confidently. By the time they realize what's happening, you'll already be in position. The music swelled again, and I heard the minister's voice. The couple will now exchange rings as a symbol of their eternal commitment. Marcus nodded at me. Go. I walked through the doors and into the ceremony space like I belonged there. Which, of course, I did. It was my property. The scene was exactly as I'd imagined. 200 guests seated in perfectly arranged chairs, their faces turned toward the altar where Dominic and Eunice stood in their wedding finery. The altar itself was decorated with thousands of white roses and flowing silk, beautiful and expensive and entirely funded by theft. I started walking down the center aisle, my heels clicking against the stone pathway. It took a few seconds for people to notice me, but when they did, the effect was electric. A woman in the front row gasped and pointed. Is that Harriet? More heads turned. Whispers started rippling through the crowd. What is she doing here? How did she get past security? Someone should call. But no one moved. They were all too shocked, too confused by my presence to do anything but stare. I was halfway down the aisle when Dominic saw me. His face went white, then red, then white again. Beside him, Eunice's perfectly made-up face twisted with fury. What the hell are you doing here? Dominic called out, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent garden. I didn't answer. I just kept walking, my eyes fixed on the altar where my husband stood with his pregnant girlfriend in her $8,000 dress. When I reached the front of the ceremony space, I turned to face the assembled guests. 200 faces stared back at me, some confused, some annoyed, some curious about what was about to happen. Good afternoon, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the garden. I'm Harriet Morrison, and I own this property. The silence that followed was absolute. No one moved, no one spoke, no one even seemed to breathe. I also own the money that paid for this wedding, I continued. Every flower, every piece of silk, every note of music you've heard today. All of it purchased with funds that were stolen from me. She's lying, Eunice said quickly, her voice shrill with panic. She's just a bitter ex-wife trying to ruin. Am I? I opened my purse and pulled out the legal documents. These are court orders establishing my ownership of Morrison Estate Gardens, effective immediately. This ceremony is taking place on my property without my permission. I handed the papers to the minister, who looked at them with growing confusion. These appear to be legitimate legal documents, he said slowly. They are, I said, just like these bank records showing how this wedding was funded. I pulled out more papers and began reading from them. $78,400 charged to Sterling Wedding Services. Paid from accounts containing funds from the illegal sale of properties that belonged to me. The crowd was starting to murmur now, confusion turning to understanding as the implications sank in. "Harriet, stop," Dominic said, his voice desperate. "You're embarrassing yourself." "No, Dominic," I said, meeting his eyes across the altar. "I'm finally telling the truth." I turned back to the crowd. 6 years ago, my father died and left me an inheritance. Properties, investments, business partnerships worth over $5 million. I never knew about it because my husband intercepted all communications about my inheritance and forged my signature to sell properties that belonged to me. A collective gasp went up from the assembled guests. The money from those sales, over $700,000, was used to fund this wedding and the new life my husband planned with his mistress. A mistress who, by the way, is not actually pregnant and has done this same thing to at least 3 other married men. Eunice made a strangled sound of protest, but I wasn't finished. "The venue you're sitting in was owned by my great-grandfather and sold to Blackwell Industries with the provision that it could be reclaimed by his heirs under certain circumstances. Those circumstances have been met." I pulled out my phone and pressed a number I had pre-dialed. "Marcus, we're ready." Within seconds, security personnel appeared from several directions. But these weren't Dominic's hired guards. These were professionals working for me. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, "this ceremony is over. You have 30 minutes to collect your belongings and leave the property." "You can't do this!" Dominic shouted. "I paid for this wedding." "With my money," I said calmly. "And now I'm taking it back." That's when the police arrived. Thomas Kellerman walked in behind the officers, pointing directly at Eunice. "That woman," he said clearly, "is under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and identity theft." Eunice tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. The police had surrounded the altar area, and her $8,000 dress wasn't designed for quick escapes. "This is insane!" she screamed as the handcuffs clicked into place. "I haven't done anything wrong." "Tell it to the judge," one of the officers said. "You have the right to remain silent." The crowd was in chaos now. Some people were trying to leave, others were pulling out phones to record what was happening, still others were demanding explanations from Dominic. But Dominic wasn't paying attention to any of them. He was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before, complete, absolute defeat. "How?" he asked quietly. "How did you find out?" "I met someone who knew my father," I said. "Someone who cared enough to tell me the truth." As if summoned by my words, Jared appeared beside me. "Everything all right here?" he asked casually. Dominic's eyes widened as he recognized him. "Jared Blackwell. You're Jared Blackwell." "I am," Jared said. "And you, Mr. Chambers, have been stealing from my business partner." The reality of it finally hit Dominic then. Not only had he been caught, but he'd been caught by one of the most powerful men in the state. There would be no talking his way out of this, no legal loopholes to exploit. "What happens now?" he asked, and for the first time in our marriage, I heard genuine fear in his voice. "Now," I said, "you face the consequences of your choices." I turned to address the crowd one final time. "For those of you who were here on Thanksgiving night, who watched my husband's mistress cut off my hair and throw me out into the rain, I want you to remember this moment. Remember that sometimes the people you think are weak are just gathering their strength." Then I took Jared's arm and walked back down the aisle. leaving Dominic standing alone at the altar with his fake bride being led away in handcuffs. Outside the estate, Marcus was waiting with updates. Police have arrested Eunice on multiple charges. The district attorney is reviewing evidence for charges against Dominic. All of his accounts have been frozen pending investigation. What about the wedding guests? I asked. Leaving very quickly, Marcus said with a grin. Most of them looked pretty embarrassed about how they treated you. I nodded, feeling strangely empty now that it was over. I'd gotten everything I wanted, my money back, my property back, my dignity back. But something was missing. Any regrets? Jared asked quietly as we walked toward his car. I thought about it for a moment, watching the last of the wedding guests hurry toward their cars. Just one, I said finally. What's that? I wish my father could have seen this, I said. He would have been proud. Jared smiled and opened the car door for me. I think he would have been proud of you long before today, Harriet. It just took you a while to see it yourself. 6 months later, I stood in the same garden where Dominic's wedding had been so spectacularly interrupted, but everything was different now. The space had been transformed from a commercial wedding venue back into the private family estate it was meant to be. The manicured perfection was gone, replaced by something more natural, more real. I was planting roses along the pathway where I had walked that January day to reclaim my life. These weren't the sterile white flowers that had decorated Dominic's ceremony. These were deep red heritage roses, the same variety my great-grandfather had grown here decades ago. Those look good, Jared said, coming up behind me with 2 cups of coffee. He'd taken to spending his weekends here, helping me restore the property to what it had been before his company bought it. They should bloom by late summer, I said, accepting the coffee gratefully. My great-grandfather always said these roses were the heart of the estate. Smart man, Jared said, though I suspect the heart of this place is actually its owner. I smiled, feeling the warmth of both the coffee and the compliment. Flatterer. Truth-teller, he corrected. There's a difference. We sat on the stone bench that overlooked the main garden, comfortable in the kind of silence that only comes with time and trust. In the distance, workmen were restoring the fountain that had been my favorite spot as a child. Soon water would flow here again, the way it had when this place was truly home to the Morrison family. Any word from Harold about the final settlement? Jared asked. Signed and sealed yesterday, I said. Dominic pled guilty to all charges, 18 months in prison, full restitution of stolen funds plus damages. And Eunice? 3 years, I said with satisfaction. Apparently the prosecutor found evidence of 2 other men she'd defrauded. Thomas Kellerman was very helpful with that. Jared nodded. Justice served. Better than that, I said. Closure. It had taken months to untangle everything Dominic had done. The forged signatures, the illegal property sales, the manipulation of bank accounts. It was more extensive than we'd initially realized. But Harold and his team had tracked down every penny, every crime, every lie. More important than the money, though, was what I'd discovered about myself in the process. Somewhere along the way, I'd stopped being a victim and become someone I actually liked. Someone strong, independent, capable of building her own life. You know what I realized yesterday? I said, watching a cardinal land on the fountain edge. What's that? I don't hate him anymore. Dominic, I mean. I don't hate any of them. Jared raised an eyebrow. After everything they put you through? That's just it, I said. They didn't put me through anything. They revealed who I really was underneath all those years of trying to be what they wanted me to be. I stood up and walked to the fountain, running my fingers through the water. When Eunice cut off my hair that night, she thought she was destroying me. But she was actually freeing me from the last thing that tied me to a life I never really wanted. And now? I gestured around the restored garden, at the house that was slowly becoming home again, at the life I was building entirely on my own terms. Now I have everything I ever really wanted. It just took me 61 years to figure out what that was. My phone buzzed with a message. I glanced at it and smiled. Margaret wants to have lunch next week. Dominic's sister? Former sister-in-law, I corrected. She's been calling every few weeks since the trial ended. Apparently, she feels terrible about how the family treated me. Are you going to see her? I considered it. The old me would have said yes immediately, eager to forgive and forget, desperate to maintain any connection to the family that had rejected me. The new me had different priorities. Maybe, I said finally, if I feel like it, if I have time. Jared smiled. I like this version of you. This version of me likes herself, I said. That's what makes all the difference. We walked back toward the house, past the garden beds I'd been working on all spring. Next month, there would be a carpet of flowers here, not the sterile perfection of a commercial venue, but the wild, beautiful chaos of a garden that's allowed to grow naturally. I have something for you, Jared said as we reached the back terrace. What's the occasion? No occasion. Just something I thought you should have. He handed me a small velvet box. Inside was a key, old brass, worn smooth with age. It's the original key to this house, he explained. Your great-grandfather gave it to my grandfather when they first became business partners. It's been in our company safe ever since. I held the key up to the light, seeing the Morrison family crest engraved in the brass. How long have you been planning to give this to me? Since the day I met you in the rain, he said honestly. I knew this place needed to come home. I walked to the back door and slid the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, as if it had been waiting all these years to work again. Perfect fit, I said. Things usually are when they belong together, Jared said quietly. There was something in his tone that made me look at him more carefully. Jared. I know it's complicated, he said quickly. I know you're just starting to figure out who you are outside of marriage, outside of being responsible for other people's happiness. I'm not trying to complicate that. Then what are you trying to do? He was quiet for a long moment, looking out over the gardens we'd been working on together for months. I'm trying to tell you that I've fallen in love with the woman who gave a stranger her umbrella in the rain. The woman who had the courage to walk into that wedding and take back everything that belonged to her. My heart did something complicated in my chest. Jared. I'm not asking you to marry me, he said. I'm not asking you to change your life or give up your independence or be anyone other than exactly who you are right now. What are you asking? He smiled, and I saw something in his eyes that I'd never seen in Dominic's during all our years together. Respect. Genuine, uncomplicated respect. I'm asking if you'd like some company while you figure out what comes next, he said. Someone to plant roses with, someone to drink coffee with in the mornings, someone who thinks watching you become yourself has been the most beautiful thing he's ever seen. I stood there holding the key to my family's home, looking at a man who wanted to be part of my life without trying to control it or change it, or make it about his needs instead of mine. You know, I said finally, I spent 35 years trying to be the woman Dominic wanted me to be. I never once asked myself what I wanted. And now? Now I want to find out what it feels like to be chosen by someone who actually sees me, I said. Not who they think I should be or who they want me to become, but who I actually am. Is that a yes? He asked, hope clear in his voice. That's a, let's see what happens, I said. But yes, I'd like the company. He kissed me then, softly, carefully, like someone who understood that trust was something to be earned rather than expected. When we broke apart, I realized I was crying. Happy tears? He asked, concerned. Free tears, I said. I'm finally free. That evening, as the sun set over the Morrison estate gardens, I sat on my front porch with a glass of wine and my phone. There were dozens of missed calls and unread messages, people who had heard about the trial, relatives who suddenly wanted to reconnect, former friends who were curious about my new circumstances. I deleted them all without reading them. Instead, I opened a new message and typed, "This is my new number. I won't be responding to calls or messages about my past, my ex-husband, or my financial situation. If you're someone who genuinely cares about me as a person and wants to be part of my future, you're welcome to reach out. Otherwise, please respect my privacy and my fresh start." I sent the message to everyone in my contact list, then immediately blocked most of the numbers. The people who mattered, the few real friends I'd maintained over the years, my sister in Colorado, Harold and his team, they could reach me. Everyone else was part of a life I'd left behind. My phone buzzed almost immediately. A message from my sister, Rachel. "I'm proud of you, Harriet. It took courage to do what you did. Can't wait to visit the estate next month." Another message, this one from Harold. "Enjoy your freedom. You've earned it." And one more, from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Thomas Kellerman. I wanted to thank you for helping me get justice for my father. Eunice will never be able to hurt another family the way she hurt ours." I smiled and set the phone aside. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear the fountain running, water flowing the way it was meant to, the way it hadn't in decades. Tomorrow, I would continue working in the gardens. I would read the books I'd always meant to read, take the painting classes I'd always wanted to try, maybe even travel to some of the places I'd dreamed about during all those years of putting everyone else's needs first. I would build a life that was entirely my own, accountable to no one but myself. And if Jared wanted to be part of that life, not as someone trying to control or change it, but as someone who appreciated it exactly as it was, well, that would be something new and wonderful to explore. At 61, I was finally beginning. The woman who had stood bald and broken in the rain 6 months ago was gone. In her place was someone stronger, someone who understood her own worth, someone who would never again accept less than she deserved. I raised my wine glass in a toast to the empty garden, to the stars coming out overhead, to the future I was going to create entirely on my own terms. "Here's to new beginnings," I said aloud. The fountain sang its agreement, and for the first time in decades, everything felt exactly as it should be. Now I'm curious about you who listened to my story. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. And meanwhile, I'm leaving on the final screen 2 other stories that are channel favorites, and they will definitely surprise you. Thank you for watching until here.